Hello, all my LMSHL friends. Happy Friday. Wanted to come out and give you guys a little midway, halfway point of the season podcast slash video. I'm hoping to have this up on YouTube and Spotify, so hopefully you guys can take a listen on your way home from work or at the gym or whatever. But anyway, just wanted to give everyone like a little update. I know I have not done one of these in a little bit since the playoffs ended in season 5. Just been busy with a whole bunch of stuff, but I wanted to come in and just kind of give everyone like a status update of everyone around the league. I think we are just past the halfway point of the season. I'm pretty sure last night was Thursday night was the halfway point. So now we are in the second half of the season. So just to look around the league, this is going to be just the NHL only. So apologies to the AHL people who are tuning in. This is just going to be NHL. I don't have much knowledge of the AHL, to be honest with you. I've just been focusing mostly on the NHL, so apologies for that. So with all that out of the way, first thing I want to do is look at the standings and then some of the storylines that we can look into from the first half of the season and some things to just keep an eye on in the second half of the year. So we'll go through all the divisions, and we'll look at the conferences just to see who, because some of the divisions, like you see the Central here, can be pretty competitive compared to like the Northwest, which is, where my team Seattle is in. It is jam-packed tight. You pretty much in the Northwest have 4 teams who are within, 3 points of each other. So it's tight, man. So just for people who might not be aware, last night, Seattle played Vancouver. We won both. One of those was in overtime. So huge wins for the Kraken. Vancouver did pick up an important point, though, because they have the tiebreaker over us because they have more regulation wins. So, yeah, it's very, very tight in the Northwest. All the teams are playing okay, I'd say. You look around at some of the other divisions, like in the Central, like all 3 of these top 3 teams, the Kings, Blackhawks, and Vegas, they would all be in first in the Northwest. Same, like Washington would still be in first. Tampa Bay would be tied for first. Boston would be way ahead. Detroit right there as well. Same with Buffalo. So it's good, I guess, for some of these teams because the division is still very much up for grabs, with the exception of Utah. All the rest of the teams in the division can very well easily win the division. And even getting second place, getting home ice for the playoffs would be definitely important. So just this whole race here is something to keep an eye on. Moving over down to the Central, LA is on a massive, massive heater. I'll talk about more on them in depth a little bit later on. But Chicago, they're off to, another team that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on as well, but they are looking solid. And Vegas kind of fallen off a little bit, mainly because Chicago has really turned it on. Vegas made some trades here and there. We'll see what happens with them. And then you have Anaheim currently in 4th with a 9-point lead over Colorado. Now we'll go over to the East. Likewise in the Northwest, the Metro, very tight. These top 3 teams, you have Washington in first, Tampa Bay in second, and Philadelphia in third. These 3 teams are also just within 4 points of each other, and I touch on them a little bit later on. But it's a little bit more competitive than the Northwest because there's only 3 teams. You have Pittsburgh and the Rangers here at the bottom with 7-point gap between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But just keep an eye on this. And then a huge thing to watch is Tampa Bay because of their 5-game losing streak going into Friday night. So just something to watch. And then we go down to the Atlantic, and Boston has really turned it on. They're way ahead of Detroit and Buffalo. Detroit, a bit of a skid in their own. They're kind of middling around. They've lost 3 in a row. They lost 2 last night to Toronto. Huge wins for the Leafs. Because Hartford has started to kind of pick their game up a little bit here. But Hartford lost to both their games to Pittsburgh last night. So They had a chance to stay on par with Toronto, and they could not do so. So some interesting races here in the divisions. If we go now to the conferences, in the West, you have the big three in the Central, then the core four. I'm just making this up. And then basically the top three teams in the Central, and then those four Northwestern teams, and then kind of tapers off with Anaheim, Utah, and Colorado. Anaheim keeping pace a little bit with the Northwestern teams, but they really got to get some wins, especially against those Northwest teams. I know Seattle has not played Anaheim yet. I'm not sure about the other teams. But yeah, for Anaheim, just trying to keep up pace because that is the last spot. They have a pretty comfortable cushion behind Utah and Colorado. So if the playoffs were to start now, we don't do a 1v8. It's how it is in real life. So currently it would be LA and Edmonton are the two division winners or leaders. Chicago and Vegas would play each other, and Calgary and Vancouver would play each other. But Seattle would play Edmonton, LA would play Anaheim. That is the current playoff picture in the West. Now we go take a look in the East. It's a little bit more balanced, I'd say. There's not a huge drop-off like there is in the West, just because LA has 53 friggin' points out of a possible, 56? That's just absurd. But Boston, they have 45. They lead the East, and then Washington is in second. So, again, the playoff picture, as it would stand currently, again, we don't do a 1v8. So Boston and Washington are the two division leaders. Detroit would play Buffalo. Tampa Bay would play Philadelphia. Washington would play, I believe. Well, hang on a second. Boston. It's easier to do. Boston would play Pittsburgh. Washington would play Toronto. And so it pretty much works out the same way as 1v8, except you have the division matchups. Instead of Philly, Detroit, you have Philly, Tampa Bay. And then you have the Rangers and Hartford in 9th and 10th. The Rangers are just a point behind Pittsburgh, and they're just a couple points behind Toronto as well. So those are the standings. Let's take a look at some of the player leaders now. Just some of the skater stats. We'll look at the leader in points. So you have Hintz for Calgary. He's got 90 points in 25 games. Putzi for Seattle, he's got 75 points in 22 games. Billy Kay, back now with Toronto. He's got 60 points in 26 games. Booch with Detroit, he's got 60 points in 18 games. And Herb, he's a rookie for Washington. He has 56 points in 17 games. And Presti has also 56 points, but only in 12 games. So those are your the top five point getters. Let's take a look now at some of the defensemen. Give them some love. We'll go defenseman point leaders. You have Foams with 30, Weiss with 28, Sphincter Shane, he's a rookie for Calgary. He's got 27. Danny, familiar name, 21 points in 16 games. And Rampy, another familiar name, he's got 21 points in 8 games. And we'll take a look at some of the goalies. Let's see. Back to player leaders. We'll go to goaltending stats. We'll go a minimum of 5 games played for the goalies, just so we can get a pretty better, accurate representation. So leading in save percentage, I Kill You from Buffalo. He's 6-2 with a 2.0 goals against and a 9.04 save percentage. Rexy, same thing, 6-2, 2.38 goals against and an 8.78 save percentage. For the Wayne Whispering, also known as E-Dubs, for Pittsburgh, he's 4-0-2, 1.83 goals against, and an 8.68 save percentage. Epic Wickster, I believe this guy is a rookie for the Whalers. He's 5-4, 2.89, and an 8.56 save percentage. And then rounding out the top 5 was Twisted Joker for Buffalo. He's 4-1-1, 2.5 goals against, and a 8.51 save percentage. So Buffalo with 2 goalies in the top 5 for save percentage. Looking good for the Sabres. So now what I want to do, just because I want this to be like a super, super long thing, just kind of want to go into some storylines here that I came up with and some more things to talk about. I know I've touched on a few of them already, but just to give you more of an idea of what the league is about, some of the teams, because for some people they might not pay attention to any other team besides their own, so which makes sense. But just if you're interested, this is what we're looking at here. So to start, the number 5 storylines. We're going through the top 5 storylines at the halfway point in season 6. So number 5, there we go. It's Hartford's ugly start. They opened the season. They lost 13 of their first 14 games. Now in their last 10, they are 5-5, but do they have enough time to overcome the deficit that they've dug themselves in? Last night I think they wasted a huge opportunity last night against Pittsburgh. They lost both those games. And like I touched on before, going into tonight, Friday the 15th, Hartford sits 6 points behind Toronto in the Atlantic Division. So definitely some ground to make up, but not insurmountable either. So about halfway through, they got to start piling the wins, especially against their division opponents like Toronto, Buffalo, Detroit, and Boston. They're way up there as well. So Hartford, tough start, but can they come back and make it interesting and put some pressure on their division opponents? We shall see. Number 4, the tight race in the Metro. Like I said earlier, there's only 4 points that separate Washington and Philadelphia. Tampa Bay is mixed in there as well. The Lightning have lost 5 in a row. So now what's happened, so Tampa Bay has led pretty much the entire season up to this point, and now Washington has now passed Tampa Bay, and now Philly, they've made some trades and improvements, and now they're right on the Lightning's heels. So Tampa Bay really has got to figure it out. I think they will. They're a good team. They just went to the Cup final last season. And just some dates to keep an eye on. So next week, the 20th, Wednesday, we have the Lightning versus the Caps. So that's a huge game for them, for both those teams. And then the weeks after that, on December 4th and December 11th, we have 4 games in total between Philadelphia and Washington. So that'll be huge, especially on the 11th. Some huge playoff implications in those games. So definitely keep an eye out for those. You got to have those wins, especially if you're Philly. You're trying to catch up, not by much. But now Washington really has control. They control their own destiny. They have if they win these games, like if they go 4-2 against these like 3 nights here, they're well on their way on winning the division and, having the top spot in the Metro. So moving on, we'll talk about the expansion teams a little bit. A little biased maybe because I'm owner of Seattle, but I want to just update everybody on their progress, what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. So, like you saw earlier in the standings, Calgary and Seattle are only separated by a single point in the Northwest. Colorado has had a slow start. They did beat LA. I will say that they did beat LA, which is a huge shock. No offense to them, but LA is such a juggernaut. So can Colorado make up the ground to catch Anaheim? I'm not sure. And like I repeated a bunch, the Northwest is certainly up for grabs for both Calgary and Seattle. And Colorado just wants to make the playoffs and stay out of the shitter cup. But some of the top point getters for these guys, like I mentioned already, Hits and Poots for Calgary and Seattle, they have a bunch of points, and then J-Rod leads the way for Colorado. Number 2, Chicago. So they started out 0-4, and their resurgence has been quite remarkable. So they started out 0-4, and now since that time, they've gone 19-4-1. And if you look into it even more, 2 of those 4 losses in regulation were forfeits to Vegas. So if you really think about it, they're 19-2-1 in the games that they played. And it sucks to say, but one of LA, Chicago, or Vegas is going to get bounced earlier than you would have thought. And it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. So that'll be fascinating to keep a little close eye on, especially as you get closer to the playoffs. Those forfeits to Vegas may come back to haunt them, Chicago, but we'll see, because home ice could be huge, especially in a potential Game 7. I could see that happening. But back to Chicago again. Cam. So they traded for Cam. His first game was October the 18th, if I remember correctly. And since that point, so that was a Friday night. Um, and they were. This is week 1, so they had lost 4 in a row. And since then, since Cam has been in the lineup, he's played in 14 games. He has 53 points, and Chicago is 12-2 with him in the lineup. So huge contributions from Cam. A great trade from Shrek and Chicago management. And we'll see if they can keep it going in the second half. And finally, the number one storyline, we've mentioned it a bunch, LA. Now, going into the season, there was a pretty widespread consensus that LA would be a top team in the league. But I wasn't sure if I saw 26-1-1 halfway through. Pretty much at this point, there's like 50 some games. Like they're gonna win close to 50 games, if not over 50 games. They are certainly the favorites to win the cup this year. Certainly the favorites to win the Central, if they haven't already clinched it already, and the West, of course. And just to speak on the depth of their roster, they have 7 players with 30 or more points. Some teams only have 1 or 2, maybe 3, but LA has 7. So it speaks to how they spread. Anyone can play, and they really score. I mean, these guys score at will. So it'll be fascinating to keep up with these guys, and everyone will be hunting them down. I'm sure they'll play a lot of the team's top lines night in and night out. So I think they'll keep it up. I think they'll probably only lose maybe 5 or 6 games the whole year, and that might be a bit too much, honestly, since they've lost 2 games, 1 in overtime, halfway through. So I mean, they're on pace to lose 4 games this entire year. So we'll see if this torrid pace keeps up, or if they kind of come back down to earth a little bit. So yeah, that's all I had for the storylines. We're about 17 minutes in. To go back over to the website here, I went over the playoff picture and all that stuff. But now, just looking at some of the team stats to wrap this up, I mentioned just now, LA's scoring abilities. I mean, they have 151 goals in 28 games. Now, if I do some quick math, 151 divided by 28, they have 5.4 goals a game. So if you're not putting up 5 or 6 goals, I mean, good luck. Boston right there up there too, Chicago, Calgary, and Seattle, and Edmonton. Yeah, see, these Northwestern teams, man, they can score. Now, I'll go to the goals against in a second, and I know who the top team is because it's my team, and it's so funny because when you play Seattle, bet the over because we're going to score a ton and we're going to give up a ton. So it's always a good time watching Seattle play. A lot of action. In terms of defensive stats, I always am interested to see takeaways and interceptions, and it's fascinating to see Colorado at the top with 816 interceptions. If we go to takeaways, Toronto, they're always at the top of these kind of categories. Toronto, for the last few seasons, I've been tracking this kind of stuff, and they always grade out well defensively. Their problem has been scoring, but you saw Billy Kay. He's got he's up there in the league with I think he's got 60. I think I said, and that's halfway through, so he'll have a 100-point season, I'm sure. So yeah, that's pretty much it. No, that's not it. Hang on, I want to go to the goals against real quick just to wrap this all up. So we go to goals against, and Colorado's up there too, but Seattle up there too. So we give up a ton. Utah, Colorado, the Rangers, Calgary. Yeah, see, us and Calgary, very similar teams in the West. And you see, the top teams, Boston, LA, Buffalo, not surprising. They have those goalies that are lights out. Chicago and Vegas down there as well. So a lot of interesting stats to see here with the new expansion teams, a lot of trades, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, apologies to the AHL guys if you're still here watching. I'm sorry. I just don't know a whole lot, and I'm busy enough as it is, and I just, I'm sorry. But yeah, hopefully, I know my power rankings get people riled up, so appreciate you looking at you, Vegas. Knack, here's your shout out, buddy. I know I'm gonna hear from you anyway. So yeah, hope everyone has a great night of games tonight and have a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving for those in the U.S. I think Canadian Thanksgiving already passed, but for my American friends, happy Thanksgiving coming up. Please be safe, and I'll talk to you later.